Welcome everyone to this edition of the Business Behind the Success. Today we're going to be discussing the business of property taxes and deferred compensation. And we have with us the treasurer and tax collector, Keith Knox. Keith, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Oh, you're welcome. I'm great. I'm happy to be with you and happy to be talking about a couple of my favorite subjects.
Cool. So before we get started, I understand that you have a disclaimer that you want to share. So I wanted to give you opportunity to share that before we get started.
Sure, please. I appreciate it. And if your audience will bear with me, just because of my day job as the tax collector, I'm also a trustee on the pension board for the county. And then I also sit on the committees for the 457 and 401 plans. So it's important that I clarify I'm just talking as myself right now and not representing the county. So while I am the treasurer and tax collector for the county of Los Angeles, I am here today with you in my personal capacity, and my views and opinions that I share are my own and not necessarily those of the county of Los Angeles, our pension plan, LACERA, which is the LA County Employee Retirement Association, and our deferred compensation plan administrative committees. What I share today is just for informational purposes only. It's not intended to be a substitute for independent professional, legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other professional service advice, which should always be obtained from professional service providers. And then any reference to commercial products or services during this podcast does not constitute endorsement of those products or services by either myself or the County of Los Angeles. So with that out of the way, I'm all yours, DeJuan. Fire away.
Deferred compensation. Okay. So Keith, what is deferred compensation?
So deferred compensation in the county is comprised of two different options for employees. It's a 457 plan, and then it's a 401 plan. Both of those, as I understand it, are, the names are derived from portions of the IRS code. Yeah. And these are different, think of them as savings plans where you can tuck away money pre-tax to be taken out at a future date.
Right.
When you're at the appropriate age and retired. 457 in the county is for everyone. We have 111,000 some odd positions. 401 plan are for management level employees. So it's a smaller subset.
And what is the difference between the 401k and the 457?
The main difference, again, is just who's allowed to participate in each one. 457, again, applies to everyone. And then the 401 is just that smaller subset. But they're largely the same. They largely have the, similar types of investment options in each one of them. They each have a maximum amount that you can put into each one every year. In the county, and again, I'm not an expert on all things 457 and 401 everywhere. So I just know in the county, the 401 has a maximum, and I just wanted to look it up real quickly.
Let me guess. It's about maybe 20. Is it up to maybe 20,500 pre-tax
now? See,
okay.
You can give this. So yeah, and then there's a catch-up provision. Right. If you're over 50 years old, then it bumps up another $6,500. But as I understand it, for the 401, the maximum includes just what I put into it.
Right.
But the county also offers a match, which is really good. Mm-hmm. The 457, the maximum includes what I put in plus that match.
Right.
So I can put in a little bit of my own salary in the 401 than I can the 457, if that makes sense.
So let me reiterate to make sure I understand what you're saying. So as it relates to the 457, the county matches what the employee contributes up to the 20,500, which is the amount that you can contribute pre-tax based on the IRS limit. And as it relates to the 401k, only the employee's contribution counts towards the the IRS limit, the 20,500, although the employer is still matching the contribution.
Correct. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And I think I got my head wrapped around it after hearing it enough times over the years, but yes.
Right. Okay. Cool. So I know this may not necessarily be your area of expertise, and you may have some information, but what are the differences between the 401k and 457 and IRA accounts? Are the 401s more something that's typically provided by an employer, and an IRA is something that maybe someone has if they're the owner of a business or something? What are the differences between those?
Yeah, and I think the main difference, as I understand it, 401, 457, you're contributing pre-tax dollars.
Okay.
And the benefit of that is that it lowers your taxable income.
Right.
And so if you made $100,000 a year and you contributed, $20,000 into your 457 or 401, then your reportable income for that year would be 80. And
Right.
you would be taxed based on, oh, Dewan, you made 80,000. The other 20 would be invisible to the state and the feds.
Mm-hmm.
That money would not be taxed until you pulled it out when you were older.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion is by then, you may not have the high salary that you do while you're working, and it would be taxed, less at that point potentially. But it's a tax advantage, to you while you're working. The Roth IRA, again, as I understand it, is an individual retirement account in which you put after tax dollars. You're contributing after tax. So after you've been taxed attacked and taxed by the federal government and the state, then you're putting your contributions in this IRA. Those contributions can grow tax free, and that's a benefit as well. So
Nice.
that's my understanding. My big focus over the years, and you've heard me present in another venue where I talked a lot about just my own personal journey and kind of the dumb mistakes that I did financially, in between the age of 20 and 30. And I was so fixated after a while on maximizing my 401 and 457 that I finally got to the point where I was maxing out on those. I have not contributed to an IRA, so I'm not an expert on those.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certainly an option for people that do want to place some money in that type of vehicle.
Okay. Why do you think that employees should take advantage of the 401k and the 457?
My hope would be that they would, because they weren't like I was when I was young and just wanted to fritter away all my money, not thinking of tomorrow. They should, for a few different reasons. I think the most obvious one that I just was, I don't know whether it was ignorance or just, again, living for each weekend, when you're young,
Mm-hmm.
is making sure you get that match.
Right.
And I used to hear like, oh, the employer match. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't even know what that is. And I need every dollar right now because I got to pay my rent and my utilities, and I need to have fun and go to the baseball game and all this stuff. So I was missing out on, up to 4% of my, contributions on the 457. So if I would have contributed, the whole time since I was, eligible for these plans, I'd have a lot more money than I do right now, because
Right.
that money, as we know, compounds every year. And yeah, the last few weeks it's not been pleasant to watch, your totals go down. But I would have a lot more money right now had I just done that, because that was free money. The county was basically there saying, Keith, we are prepared to give you 4%,
Mm-hmm.
of your salary if you want it. And
Right.
and essentially I said, no, I'm good. Yeah, no, 4%. Yeah, why would I want your money?
Yeah.
Right. But here I couldn't wait for, like, the annual cost of living that was 2%, thinking, ooh, I'm gonna have like, another $100 that I can spend somewhere, that month. But just like no conception of free money that would have been really big dollars
Hmm.
20 years later,
Right.
25 years later, 30 years later. So that's the biggest thing, is just getting people to understand this match is free money. And the
Hmm.
county, is really good with the match, but a lot of private employers do. And I know you're not just talking to county folks through this. So
Right.
so that match is important, especially because pensions are not as readily available as they were in the past. That's why, a lot of employers offer that match,
Hmm.
because they want to retain employees, they want to incentivize them to save, et cetera. The other big reason is just that um, looking out for the future. I mean,
Right.
it's tough. I mean, you and I are not the same age, and it's not easy for me to tell you, hey, you really got to be, smart. So when you're my age, you're in a much better situation than I, am, because I did some dumb stuff. You're like, yeah, Keith, whatever. I hear you. You got your own thing going on. But it's important for all of us to emphasize that need to save,
Right.
and it's important for us all to um, think long term, and it's not easy. And that's the hardest part, because I tell people when I talk, at the presentation that I did for your group with the county, I get that I'm, a well-paid, high-level person, and not everybody has that salary level. I completely understand that. When I met my wife, she was a single mom, two kids,
Right.
struggling to stay in her house, bills, had her, brother living with her so she could, afford the mortgage, the whole 9 yards. But she was making it work,
Right.
and she was, contributing little bits where she could. And that's what's important, is just realizing that big picture, thinking, no, I need to set goals. I need to set myself up, even if it's just that little bit.
Right.
That's why it's important, because it's not just, and you can fill in whatever kind of, thing you hear at financial seminars, or kind of the savings, things on the radio, and a lot of those are very good.
Hmm.
Um, but you really want to put yourself in a position where you have options,
Right.
and that's what's really important, is just, if you have saved appropriately, you will give yourself more options when you are older. You'll have more flexibility. Does it mean you're going to buy a private island? Does it mean that you're going to have a private jet? Does it mean you're going to have LeBron James money? Does it mean that I'm going to have Josh Allen, a far more obscure reference? Um, no, but by saving, I have more options, and I can think to myself, well, no, if I want to keep working, I can. I like what I'm doing. If I feel like, no, I've saved up plenty. I'm good. I have the option to retire. So those are the things that are really important to think about and remember.
And an added benefit to that is, in my understanding, is that you can borrow from yourself as well. So let's say, for example, if you needed the money to put down on a home, if you've been investing money over a certain course of time, or a period of time rather, and you want to borrow some money to put a down payment, you can borrow it from yourself, right?
You can, and this is where, again, I had my disclaimer at the very outset. This is Keith's opinion. It's his personal opinion, not reflective of anybody's. I really caution people against that.
Okay.
And I'm not the only one. If you read, you know, the the uh, the articles, or the things that come out on the weekends with the financial advice, like in the LA Times, you'll read where they strongly recommend against tapping any of your retirement accounts,
Hmm.
your deferred compensation accounts. In the county, yes, you have the option to take, a loan. You have the ability to tap funds in an emergency. And there are absolute emergencies, and we all know that COVID highlighted a lot of them for a lot of people. So if if tapping your deferred compensation allows you to stay in your home, if tapping your deferred compensation allows you to put a new roof, and if you didn't put a new roof, your house would be destroyed because of a ongoing rain. Absolute legitimate things. There are absolute legitimate medical issues that people encounter in really difficult circumstances. The ones that I personally, for me, I do not tap my deferred compensation because, it'd be great as if we took a big family cruise on the Disney, boat. Because you're pulling money out, you're going to have to pay it back. You're going to have to pay it back plus interest. And meanwhile, while that money's not in there, it's losing the ability to grow and compound and do all that. So yeah, I tend to personally be on the side of you should not touch it. Only break glass in case of extreme emergency.
Right.
But I can't speak for everyone in their circumstances, but there are, means to tap it when necessary.
Okay. And this question is for Keith. So let's say, for example, you have someone who doesn't have a down payment. Maybe they need $10,000-$15,000 to put to get into a home. Or is it your opinion that they should not tap into the money to get the 10 to 15,000? And I heard what you said about it. When you pull the money out, it's losing its ability to gain value over time. But I think the caveat to that is, if you were to obtain ownership in a property, now you own something that's appreciating. So even though you lost, value in one area over time, you're gaining it somewhere else. And I agree with you 100% in terms of you shouldn't pull it out to buy a car or, go on vacation and stuff like that. But if it's something else of value and it's not going to put you in a compromising position in terms of paying your monthly bills, would you still disagree with that?
It depends certainly on individual circumstances. A new, and a lot of people in terms of a new car, a lot of people don't even recommend buying a new car. They'll say buy a pre-owned car. That way you get some of the valuation loss out of the way, and you get something that's already broken in the whole 9 yards, and it's a lot cheaper. But a priority for somebody to have any car that doesn't have a car, that needs a car to get to work, to make money, to feed their family and to support themselves, that's different than somebody that's like, oh, what I really want is that new fill in the blank car.
Right.
I want that new electric truck when it comes out, that Elon Musk hit with the sledgehammer. That's the one that I want. I mean, that's a big difference.
Right.
For me personally, if it was, I really need, and nowadays, I mean, 10 to 15,000 really doesn't even move a needle for a house. But let's assume, something sizable, $50,000, just to help try and do something in terms of a place to live, whether it's a townhome, a condo, a house. I personally would emphasize, a lot of the things you hear about, and I'm not, a genius for bringing any of these up, but it's, what are you willing to do to save that money yourself first, in terms of cutting expenses, in terms of a second job, in terms of, borrowing from friends and family. If I can tap, a relative that has the means to loan me money, is that preferable than, or to pulling money out of my deferred compensation, where again, I'm paying interest back and that money is not working like it should be.
Right.
I think, again, for me personally, I would have options that I should consider before I ever tap that deferred comp.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your personal thoughts on cryptocurrency? First, let me back up a little bit. Does the county, does the organization that manages the county's funds invest into crypto? And whether yes or no, what are your personal thoughts on cryptocurrency?
The easiest answer is no, we don't invest in crypto.
Okay.
My personal thoughts are, it's like anything to me, where it's, oh, everybody's talking about XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I really need to be in XYZ. And lately, not even lately, but the last few years, it's like, wow, crypto. It seems like everybody's talking about this. And, I think any of us were at Thanksgiving, a holiday party, and if you're around anybody that kind of talks about money or investing, invariably somebody will say, well, you're in crypto, aren't you? And aren't you thinking about getting into it? And I just, no, I'm happy plugging away at my 457, my 401.
Mm-hmm.
I pay down my house as fast as I can.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is important. I believe strongly that you should understand how something works
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to invest in it.
Right.
And I remember a while back, I have an adult son, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about investing in crypto." And I remember asking him, "Well, A, are you maxing out on what you can do on your 401 and 457? Because if you're not, then why are you
Right.
thinking you have extra money to invest?"
Yeah, right.
But then even beyond that, can you explain how it works? Can you explain what makes it go up and what makes it go down? Can you explain what it's tied to?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where people go, oh, and well, I mean, I just see everybody doing it, and it becomes the proverbial thing that many a parent told us, like, well, if you see somebody doing something, does that mean you always have to do the same thing? So, and it's not like, I knew that crypto would take a big, downward spiral the last few months. So, Bitcoin is way down from where it was.
Right. Absolutely.
It's in the 20,000 range. And what was it at one point? 50,000 range, 60,000
Yeah.
range? Yeah, ridiculous amounts. And yeah, and those are the types of things that make your eyes go, oh my gosh, I could have been rich. Well, any of us could have been rich if we had a crystal ball, and
Mm-hmm.
if we could predict the future. But I like tried and true. I'm in a position where we take a conservative stance,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we need to do. But I just kind of embody that myself. I think there's ways that I can be smart with my money. If I have maxing out on the things that I've maxed out on, and I have extra money, if you said, Keith, I just absolutely want to do it, I wouldn't tell you, well, geez, I don't think you should. I'd say, well, you do you, you
Right.
know. But I just personally, I don't understand it enough to want to invest in it. And beyond the hype, okay, I see some people make money in it, but I see a lot of people losing money.
Yeah. I'm,
Um,
I'm one of those people. First of all, I didn't invest more than what I wanted to walk away from, or more
yeah,
than I could walk away from. That was the first thing, because I didn't know enough about it, but at the same time, I still felt the pressure to get on the wave. It's like, if I
yeah,
can get in, make a little bit of money, then that'll be good. But the worst case scenario, if I lose this, I'm comfortable with losing this amount. And I mean, technically, right now, a lot of people are in the negative right now. But I
yeah.
keep looking at it, and I'm like, do I want to buy any more? And I haven't been able to muster up the will to buy any more, because I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's hard to wrap your head around. There's so many different types.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and at some point, if that becomes, you know, much more commonplace, it becomes better regulated. Um, yeah, maybe.
hmm
But I get people asking me, "Oh, are you going to accept crypto for property taxes?" And I usually just kind of laugh it off and say, "I just want people to pay the way they're supposed to."
right.
But it gets tricky because um, I heard an example. I was at a conference this last week, and they had an update about crypto and just sharing information about it and how it's gone up and down. And they shared a story early on in Bitcoin. Somebody that had some early Bitcoin, wanted to have fun with it and wanted to pay for something using Bitcoin. Like, oh,
hmm
I'm so hip and unique and, you know, fresh that I'm on the front end of this. I'm going to buy a pizza with Bitcoin.
Right.
And I don't remember the exact figure, but it, you know, the what the person was saying was that, yeah, they bought a pizza for Bitcoin, like, you know, in 2017 or whenever the heck it was. It was early on. So if it was a decade ago, whenever. But had they just kept that Bitcoin
Mhm.
and had it, you know, the value, even though it's dropped a lot now, it's like they paid a couple $100 million for that pizza. You know,
Mhm.
so it's like
Right.
you never know with silly things like that. So if I can't understand it, if it's not regulated, if it goes up and down on a whim,
Yeah.
it's not for me, but I know that it's for others, and other people have made money. And I mean, you know, I wish I would have bought Amazon stock.
Yeah, I know
You
that's
know,
right.
I'd have a ton of money. I wish I would have purchased Apple stock. When I was in my 20s, I used to work in an office where people talked about, oh, Microsoft, if only we would have bought Microsoft stock, we'd have so much more money. And
Mhm.
this was in the mid 80s. And I remember listening to them thinking, oh, yeah, I wish I would have done that. But I could have bought Microsoft when they were complaining about missing the boat, and I'd have a lot of money now.
Right.
You know, so it's like sometimes you're just like, it's okay, what's happened has happened.
Right.
But you've got to just keep plugging along and investing where you can. And, you know, if you have a plan and you're comfortable with that plan and it fits with what your goals are, you'll make progress.
Right. Right. And we're wrapping up, but I did want to circle back around to something that you said earlier when you were saying that at first you didn't take advantage of deferred compensation through part of your 20s. How many years went by before you started to take advantage of it? And just to be able to put things into perspective for the viewers, how much do you think that time frame or the money that you would have put during that time frame will be worth today compounded? And I know that you probably can't do the math or anything, but just ballpark figure
Oof.
just to paint the picture.
Oh, no, thank you for bringing up a painful memory, Dewan. This is helpful. I'm going to be like the pizza guy with the Bitcoin. Yeah, not that bad. You know, all joking aside, and I share this just because I'm happy to tell my story, because I'm happy that I have hit some big goals with my 401 and 457.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's a part of me that is just like, oh, and it's not like, oh, I missed Amazon or I missed Microsoft or I missed, you know, the gold rush. It's that I missed easy money
Right.
that would have just been mine had I just, you know, not been such a knucklehead frittering away money on, you know, silly stuff, and
Right.
just been just a little more mature, a little more measured. And I don't know, I mean, 100,000.
Yeah, that's a nice chunk. You
Yeah,
know.
I mean, a lot of money. And it just it grows so fast. I have two adult kids. You know, one I was talking to this week, she's like, oh, Dad, I have, you know, $30,000 in my deferred compensation. You know, and she goes, but yeah, it's not as much as you have. And I said, don't forget, I had 30,000 at one point too.
Right.
And my son, oh, Dad, you know, I passed $100,000. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Yeah,
Right.
Dad, but it's not as much as you have. And I said, yeah, but when I was your age, I didn't even have 100.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perspective that we lose sight of. We're constantly thinking of, oh, but somebody else has something more. Somebody else has something better. But you know, I've done well, even though I started later than I should have.
Right.
You know, I just, it's a matter of rededicating yourself. It's a matter of being informed. It's helpful that you have podcasts like this, because we don't talk about things enough.
Right.
And everybody wants to portray themselves as really smart, as cutting edge, as in on the perfect thing. And why aren't you? And you're missing out if you're not. Um, when really we need to have more conversations about the basics of things and the smart way to do things, and options when you get older. Those are important.
Right. Right.
But thank you for reminding me on the money I've missed.
No,
I'll probably wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, if I just would have not bought so many stupid things when I was young.
I think you'll be all right. I think
Yeah.
you made up for it.
No,
Um,
it's okay. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. Yeah, I don't mean to minimize, dollar amounts. I mean, money is important for everybody,
right,
and it's good to hit those goals,
right.
and just start measurable and start by paying down your bills. One thing that I mentioned, and I know we've talked a lot tonight, but one thing that I mentioned is I carried credit card debt,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of people do, and it's easy to go, well, you shouldn't have credit card debt, and sometimes you're a knucklehead like I was, but sometimes you have that because of life
Right,
and because of circumstances you couldn't avoid. Um, so it's just understanding that it's starting to dig your way out of it. It's coming up with a plan, and there's a ton of things, certainly that people can avail themselves of. Um, Working with somebody, getting good financial advice, um, talking to a financial advisor. I'm in a very important role in the county. I've talked to a financial advisor, just to pull somebody neutral, somebody to say, oh yeah, Keith, you're doing this, this, and this. And you brought up the IRA. That was one thing that this person mentioned to me.
right,
Keith, the one thing that you're not doing is blah. Oh, okay. And it's not because I thought I was the smartest person in the world. It was because I had just been focused on some other things that didn't occur to me as an option.
right.
Um, so, so yeah, those are all very important things to think about.
Okay. And final two questions. First one, I believe you and I believe you shared this with me years ago. I want to say we were talking about putting up money for education. I wasn't sure if it was a 529, but you were saying that you put it up for your children, for them. It was a way for you to put money away for their college. Could
Yep.
you speak about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So a 529 plan, and again, it's not supposed to be like numerical and alphabetical soup, on this podcast, but a 529 plan is basically a college savings account.
Mhm.
And these are really good. And they don't require a huge investment. If, and I'll, share my own personal story with this. I have two kids. They are kids from my wife's prior marriage, so they are my stepkids. They call me dad. I call them my kids. But I didn't start saving for them when they were born. I wasn't there. So I started a 529 when my daughter was 13 years old, and I did $200 a month. And what's special about a 529 is you attach somebody's name to it. So my daughter and my name was on it. I put $200 a month. You select investments, and you can pick things like mutual funds and whatever. You can be as aggressive as you want. I was probably a little more aggressive because she was not a toddler. She was 13. And I thought, okay, if I can tuck money away, and I think my goal was $15,000. In 5 or 6 years when she's 18, I would probably have $15,000. And I kept plugging away my $200, and it grows and grows. And when she went to junior college, so I got a little lucky. She didn't go straight to a 4-year school. So by the time that she needed the money, um, she was 20. So I got like 7 years, and instead of 15, I think I had close to 40.
Wow.
And some of that was just, the market and the economy had been good at certain points. But it just shows you, and if you plug away,
Mhm.
you can contribute a lot of money. And the 529 is great because that money is tax free when you pull it out.
Right.
And it's super easy. It can be used for books. It can be used for the dorms if they live out of the house. It can be used for tuition. It was fantastic, and it paid. My daughter went out of state for school, and it paid for over a year of
Nice.
out of state college. And for me, it was like almost free because it's like this money had been out of sight, out of mind,
Yeah.
and I just kind of set it and forget it. I didn't like manage it actively or change my investments or ooh, I'm so smart. I
Yeah.
just let it do its thing. And it was like a year of free school. So if people start that early, just put everything they can, especially as expensive as college is getting, that thing's awesome, the 529. And there's one, I think, for each state. You don't have to pick the one for California, and you can do your own research. They're run by different companies, but those are really good.
Nice, nice. Thank you. So last question, and this is like a similar to like a part one, part two. And this question is, what does Keith Knox invest in? So I don't know if you take advantage of the ability to move funds over from like the 401k and the 457 over to Charles Schwab, where you can kind of pick the individual investments. So the part one is, do you invest? Do you move money over where you can kind of pick the individual investments? And if so, what do you invest in? And then part two is, if someone were to give you $50,000 today, what would you invest it in?
Oh, wow, that second part is good. I'll start with the first part, and it's going to be really boring, but I'll explain why. I am in our target date funds on the 401, 457. So when I was younger and a knucklehead, and I finally started getting into the 401, 457, I selected, some aggressive, a more aggressive mixture of investments, because we have all kinds of options in the 401, 457. So I had put a big chunk in small cap, a big chunk in large cap, just kind of the big companies, medium companies, small companies. Mm-hmm. And that did pretty well, I think, just more than anything because of timing and good fortune. So maybe somebody was smiling on me for starting so late, but there was some good things. But in 2008 and 9, I distinctly remember, and I mentioned this to some folks here the other day, I lost a huge chunk, like 30%. Mm-hmm. of my balance when the market tanked, right, just because I did not have much of a diversification in terms of my investments. So after that, I said, I need a better mix of things, and the county had started doing these target date funds, and quickly, in case somebody doesn't know what those are, your investments that you make change over time automatically as you get older, with the thought being, when you're younger, you're further away from retirement, you can afford to be more aggressive with your investment mix because you you would like to get higher returns.
Right.
As you get older and you're nearing the point where you want to take that money out, you would need it to be more conservative. You don't want to take as many risks typically, because, well, I'm getting closer to needing that money. So in my 529 example in my daughter's school, I would not, and I remember towards the end when I was starting to need it, the market was jumping around, and I said, I'm gonna put it in something a little more bland. I'm not going to be so risky because I'm going to need this money soon, and I don't want to see it drop by a chunk.
Right.
But if she was 2 or 3 years old, I wouldn't care if it jumped around a lot because I don't need it for 20 years.
Right. Right.
So I put my money now, and I have for several years, in the target date funds for a few different reasons. I like that it's very diverse. Mm-hmm. I like that it does it automatically as I get older. And I like being an ambassador for what I think is a good option for employees to consider,
right,
which is the target date fund, because I personally think that there are people that are way too conservative, mm-hmm, and they'll put it like in the stable, mm-hmm, value, and they just do that because they say, well, I don't want to see it go down. Well, I don't like to lose money.
Right.
I mean, I like to make money. I like to see that money grow. I don't like when it goes backwards, but I understand as a reasonable investor, it's going to go up and down.
Right.
You watch the trend over time, and it does this in short periods, but over time it looks like this
Right.
generally.
Right.
And that's what I'm thinking of. And I would like to have that money grow so it's bigger when I'm older. And if some people are just really comfortable with that little incremental progress, okay. It's
Yeah.
not my place to tell them that's wrong. Um, but I like being an ambassador and saying, yeah, you don't have to be day trading. You
Hmm.
don't have to be an expert. We have options for people that are and like those, but and it's not like, well, if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for everybody. I just like saying I'm happy with them.
Right.
The market has really been up and down, but you can see that the target date fund for me is doing what it's supposed to. It's gone down lately, but not as much as if I would have been in the old investments
Right.
that were more risky for someone my age, that typically should be in. So that's what I'm in, and I tell people, I don't say I recommend you do the same. I just say I'm happy telling you what I do. It's not a
Right.
secret, and it works, and it's great. Um, the other thing you asked about if I had $50,000.
Or 100. Just if
Oh,
you were to come into, if someone was to give you, or you were to come into, or you found a briefcase, what
well,
would?
if I found a briefcase, I'd try and find out whose it is. I don't want to get. Sometimes I carry my own bag out of here, and I wonder if people are going to tease me asking what's in the bag. Um, again, I'm kind of boring. I would finish, paying off my house. Um, I would, probably ask my kids how I could help them with something.
Mhm.
Um, One other thing that we haven't talked about, and I've heard in other sessions, that I've listened to, it's nice being generous as you get older.
Right.
And I mentioned I was a knucklehead when I was younger. I was also very selfish. And some of that is just, we tend to think of ourselves. I mean, that's fine.
Mhm.
But as I've gotten older, I've appreciated more. And much of this I got from my wife, who's always been very generous,
Mhm.
and sends money to her hometown in Mexico. And just was one of those people. But it feels good to be generous, and it feels good to be able to help. Um, so I would probably want to do something, positive with that money, that is tangible, beyond just, oh, I think I'm going to send some money to some charity. Not that that's a bad thing. I just would like to see it put to work in a particular community or for a particular group. So I've done more of that over the years too. Again, not to, sound like I'm holier than thou, but I think that gives me a measure of satisfaction as I've done better in my life, that I can, you know, send somebody to, we send money to Mexico to help put somebody through a medical school. And it's
Right.
just fun. It's not huge money, and it's like it's meaningful. So I'd probably do some of that too. Sorry if
No,
that's boring. It's not
no,
Bitcoin.
that's a great answer.
It's not NFTs. It's not Bitcoin. It's not all these new things that I don't understand.
No, 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 no. That's a great answer. And just to wrap up, for me, if I was to come into it, it would probably take more than 50 or $100,000. But if I were able to come into some money, one of the things that I would like to do is maybe provide or assist in providing affordable housing for senior citizens, especially senior citizens who receive SSI, because a lot of times their income is capped in terms of the monthly amount that they have coming in. But with inflation and everything getting more and more expensive, it's hard on them, and they're not in a position to go back to work or anything. So for me, in terms of giving back, if one day I can be in the position to assist with the development of some homes, some affordable homes for seniors, then that's my goal. But
Yeah.
50 to 100,000, um, I don't know. That question came up because I was talking to a friend, and they were in a process of coming into some money, and they didn't know what to do with it. So I said, you know what? Whenever I have my show and I have a guest, I'm going to ask everyone, what would they do with it? So that's where that question came from.
Well, you tell your friend, give it to you.
I know, right?
You'll take that problem off their hands.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Keith, thank you. You provided a wealth of information. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight and provide everything that you provided. Is there anything that you would like to share? Any helpful tips or information that you would like to share with the viewers as we close out?
Sure, thank you. It was a pleasure being with you, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity. I always like talking about money and finance, and especially property taxes. So my last ask of everyone is, if you pay property taxes, please consider paying them online. It's fast, it's easy, and if you pay with an e-check, an electronic check, there's no cost to you. 90% of our electronic payments are made through electronic check. All those people are doing it at no cost. If you use a credit or debit card, there's a 2.22% fee. So that's why we encourage people to pay online. You don't have to write us a check. You'll save yourself a stamp. You don't have to worry like, oh, I know it's at the deadline. I hope it makes it in time. All that stuff. So thank you again. Please pay online, and please put that money away and take advantage of the match wherever you can.
Nice. All right.
Please visit our property tax portal, which can be found at propertytax.lacounty.gov. It's got a lot of great information from the Office of the Assessor, the Auditor Controller, the Assessment Appeals Board, and the Treasurer and Tax Collector. And if you are interested in finding out information on how to pay your property taxes, certainly you can also go to our website, which is ttc.lacounty.gov. A lot of good information about how to pay your property taxes online, how-to videos, multiple languages that you can change our website into. And then we also talk about our other business lines in the department, including our investments, our auctions of defaulted properties, business license, and then of course the public administrator, where we talk about estates of the deceased and just some good general information that everyone can learn about.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Business Behind the Success. Our goal is to have informative conversations and share personal perspective with individuals who are successful in their field of expertise, in hopes that it will lead to more favorable outcomes for anyone seeking guidance. If you support the content, please hit subscribe. For more info about what we do, please visit dbinvestmentsco.com. We can be contacted at info@dbinvestmentsco.com. Once again, that's info@dbinvestmentsco.com.